a discussion around the Eden guide the neighborhood guide modules, and this manual that I'm talking about is actually up here, and you can see mine gets used a bit. And so a lot of what I will be talking about is here, and if you want to talk about it afterwards, and if I spawn a few questions, I'll be glad to do that. And I must say again, my mentor Nancy Fox is pretty much the author of this. So along with Evie and Sandy, and they're all here at the conference. So let's see if this. Well, here we go. There we go. Okay. Wouldn't let me use my own computer. There are three components to organizational strategy, and this is just some thinking. This is not out of the Harvard Business Review or anything like that, but just thinking. So go with me for just a little bit here, and then we'll fill in, put some meat on these bones. Three components of organizational strategy, and really what I'm saying here is everything we think about in a business should be able to, we should bring it back to these three things: product, team, and long-term success of the organization. How many of you have had products or bought products that have something like a lifetime warranty to them? We're kind of used to that, aren't we? Anybody ever heard of Filson products? They have some really good hunting clothes and outdoor clothes. Here's what they have to say: you can depend absolutely upon our goods, both as material, to its material and workmanship. That's pretty cool, huh? Anybody ever shopped at LL Bean? Buy some of their things? Same kind of thing. I've actually been to the LL Bean store, and I was there, and this guy brought back a pair of boots to the service counter. I thought, my God, you're not really returning those things, are you? But it turns out they'll put some new soles on them for you, whatever you want. Basically, this idea of we stand behind our product, we're so proud of our product, we're so proud of the product that we deliver, that we will stand behind it. Can you imagine if we did that in long-term care? What would happen if we said, oh, we give you money-back guarantee, come on in, get your rehab, money-back guarantee, don't worry about it. Well, we'd probably all like to do that. I don't know that our nurses and our nurse aides would like to work knowing that that could happen, because you know how people can be. But I think it gives us an interesting way of looking at product and realizing that everything we do in our industry, if you will, is about product. So the other aspect that I'd like for you to focus on in organizational strategy is team. Now, speaking of Harvard, let's see what the Harvard Business Review has to say about team, actually about collaboration in their spring issue. They talk about a number of misconceptions of team. The first one is this: harmony helps. Well, no, as Nancy will tell you, conflict can be a healthy thing. Conflict, when well managed, generates more creative solutions. Okay, that makes some sense. Misconception number two: it's good to mix it up. Good to, you kind of hear people talk about that. Well, let's get this new and varied group. Well, no, that's another misconception. In reality, people that work together longer and over a period of time work together a little better. They sort of learn how to work with each other. Bigger is better. I heard people say that before, haven't we? Let's get a big old crowd together. Well, no, not really. There seems to be some magic numbers around 4 or 5, something like that, that you can create a group about that size and you'll work a little better together. There's this one thing called social loafing. Has anybody ever been exposed to social loafing? I think that we all have. They don't make the best team members, do they? Another misperception: face-to-face intervention is passé. Not what the research says. And what a great advantage for us in long-term care. We can be face-to-face. We're face-to-face all the time, maybe more than we want to at times. It all depends on the leader. I really used to think this one a lot, I have to confess. It all depends on the leader. Well, the leader can set things up for success and help make things work out, but it's really that team. Think of the times that you've led teams, and some have been more successful than the other, but you were still the same leader, right? It was the people on that team that really made the difference. Teamwork is magical. No, teamwork is not magical. It takes a lot of hard work, and if I were to tell you otherwise, it would be a lie. It takes a lot of hard work and a lot of resources. So that's what the outer world, if you will, thinks about team. It looks at team and says, yeah, this is some pretty good stuff. You can get some really good results from team. Now this next one is my favorite. Well, they're all my favorites. Long-term success of the organization. Does anybody remember a Vega, a Chevrolet Vega, or a Ford Pinto, or an AMC Gremlin, or any of these things? It's very rare to see them. It's very rare to see them because they were not well made. They were not a good product. They just weren't. And not long after those cars tried to roll down the road for the 40,000 miles that they could, came a company called Honda, and then maybe a company called Toyota, and now we've got, the list goes on. I contend that the automotive industry got caught up in quarters and not 5-year increments. They got caught up in how are we going to make the most of this next quarter, and didn't worry quite as much about the 5-year increments. Meanwhile, Lexus and Mercedes and all the others are far more common on our roads now. And you can literally drive along, even in the poor state of Mississippi, and see much fewer American cars than you will foreign cars. I believe that it is a short-sightedness, and we all know what happened to General Motors a few years back. So, product, team, and long-term success of the organization. 3 essential components to organizational strategy. Now, what on earth does this mean to nursing homes? Well, let's find out. Whoops, did it work? Great. So what does product mean in a nursing home? What is our product? And I'm not saying this is the answer, but this is just a couple of thoughts we can have. Seems to me that we have some questions to ask ourselves about product. Clinical outcomes. That's pretty important to product, right? What can we do to improve our clinical outcomes? Now, I told you we'd talk about a few things, so if you will, grab your handouts, and what your handouts are, and we've had a few more people show up than we anticipated, so if you would kind of look on with folks. And I'm sharing with you some of the tools that are in the guide module to show you how these tools relate to answering the questions that we've posed about product. So the first question is, can we improve our clinical outcomes? I think we're all interested in that. How does our home feel? You know what I mean by that? I'll tell you a quick story. A friend of mine was in one of our places, and he had a horrible car wreck. He's since died, but he lived with us for several months, had a brainstem injury, and he just never could get over it. I was at his funeral, and a number of people, I would say, well, I'm a friend of Don's, and he said, well, I think I've seen you before. I said, well, I had one of the nursing home that he was in. And I they'd light up a little bit. You know, people don't really light up about nursing homes much, do they? But to a person, they kept saying, you know, there was really this neat feel there. And I know you guys get the same comments about your places as well. There was just really this warm feel when I was there. So many people, and that's what made me think about this, is real life here. So many people said, what kind of feeling do you get there? And I've even over the years advised people that, well, how do I find a nursing home? Well, how do you feel about it? What kind of feeling do you get there? So I think that's really important. And the third thing is, are our customers satisfied? And we know about that too. So we'll talk about tools for all 3 of these. So let's go back to clinical outcomes. How many times have you heard a nurse say, if they had just told me, if I had just known, I would have followed up on the incident report, or this, that, or the other. And you got to admit, there's been a couple surveys that come along, and a surveyor found something you didn't know about. Had I just known, we would have taken care of this, or at least we would have mitigated some things. So, first tool I want you to pull out is Team Communicator. Should be your first page there. And what this is a position in our neighborhoods. And let's digress just a moment and say that what we're talking about in growing team in a nursing home is creating a neighborhood with self-directed work team. And that is a group of people who are dedicated to that neighborhood, They don't work in other neighborhoods. They work only in that neighborhood of about 20 or 25 elders. And they are dedicated to caring for those elders and the operation, if you will, of that neighborhood. They're charged with making the decisions to run that neighborhood along with the elders. You'll recognize that as Principle 8. And it is up to that self-directed work team to actually run the neighborhood, and they are empowered to do so. So this is one of their tools. One of the tools is the team communicator. So this is an individual. There's always a team communicator there, and this individual communicates from one team to the next. For example, what's going on that day? Celebrations, changes in care plans, whatever that may be. If there's a matter that needs to be communicated, this person is responsible for communicating that from one team to the next within the neighborhood. So this is a tool that addresses then clinical outcomes. A tool that addresses clinical outcomes. I know you can see how important communication is. The next tool that I've got there is the learning circle. I'm sure that you are all familiar with the learning circle. Hopefully all of you have used it. A tool that is imperative for teams to be successful. It is a time when people can come together and break down the barriers between administrative and care and come together as care partners to take care of elders. So another tool that we've used that is all about communication, again, going back to those clinical outcomes. Another one that is really interesting here is called the 5 Whys. Maybe I can get a little bit of help reading through these. You want to be a reader real quick? I got to give you something to read first. All right, what we're talking about here is if an incident happens, what can we do, and we're still on clinical outcomes here, what can we do to find out what happened? And the instrument is the 5 Whys. I'll read the first one here. Mr. Smith fell at 2 p.m. in his room. So what we're going to do is ask ourselves 5 times why he fell. All right, the first layer.
Why did Mr. Smith fall at 2 o'clock p.m. in his room? Because he woke up from his nap and got out of bed.
All right, and then the second one is, why did he wake up from his nap? Because he needed to go to the bathroom. You want to read?
Where are we?
All right, why did he need to go to the bathroom?
Because he drank 2 cups of coffee at lunch.
Okay, then let's ask ourselves one more time, why? Why did that wake him up?
Because he did not go to the bathroom before his nap.
All right, and the 5th layer, why didn't he go to the bathroom before his nap? Because he forgot, and all the CNAs were busy after lunch and didn't remind him. So this tool of the 5 Whys, again, part of what's taught in the guide modules, teaches us how to focus on that clinical outcome and how to dig deep. Now, the next part, feel. There's another exercise that we go through called New Eyes, and it's a chance for someone to literally through these team exercises. And by the way, when we teach these exercises, we're meeting on a monthly basis, and we are with each team from all different departments because we're breaking down those silos and we're saying, okay, what can we do to learn with one another, and what can we do to create this space a little differently? So we take them through a drill where we actually say, okay, close your eyes, and it is if we're asking you to live in a nursing home. And that's another drill we've gone through as well. Part of that, looking at how your home feels as if you were there. Did you say, say for example, as I mentioned, my friend had a car wreck. Well, okay, put yourself there. If you've had a stroke, put yourself there. And we can all think of folks whom we know who are actually in these positions. But the New Eyes exercise has been really helpful in having people look and see even some small things that can be changed that can make your place more like home and less like an institution. Now, let's take a look at customer satisfaction here real quick. and I'm having to push along a bit because my allotment is a little short here. So let's look at customer satisfaction. And again, back to product. If you will, look at this document, the true cost of poor customer service. How many of you do some customer service things in your homes? It's something that a lot of other companies do, but a lot of times we don't think about that in healthcare, especially in the institutional model. So if you'll take a look at this one real quick, great document to use. The average business will hear nothing from 96% of unhappy customers. That's kind of scary. Of those unhappy customers, they will tell that unhappy story to at least 9 people. Wow. But we can mitigate that some by responding quickly and resolving the complaint quickly. And the worst thing we can do is be indifferent. Now remember, this is a tool that we're teaching to all of our housekeeping folks, CNAs, LPNs, the whole 9 yards. So a great tool as an example of what the neighborhoods are learning. And the next one is on managing complaints. So often we get defensive in what we do, don't we? And it's a little difficult to deal with complaints. But this document here, again, another tool of the guide module, takes people through and says, okay, instead of being that defensive, just saying, well, I'm sorry that happened. And looking at a complaint as a gift, and saying, wow, that was really a good way. I appreciate that information and thank you for the gift of that information. So another great tool there. Now, let's go to the next slide here. So we've talked about product, clinical outcomes, how does it feel, and are your customers satisfied? Three questions I think we need to continually ask ourselves about product. And I think it's important that we have ways to answer those questions. Whoops. Team. Okay. Let's talk about team just a minute and ask ourselves some questions. How many people worry about your team being stable? Whether you're divided into neighborhoods, self-directed work teams, or whatever it might be, stability may well be the most important thing we deal with. So, what makes a team stable? Have you noticed that people who trust each other work better together? And how much better results you can get? So trust equals character plus competence. There's a great story in the guide module called Nanook, and it is a story about a tribesman who gossips, and it's a very negative result. And the use of the story I have noticed, and some of you may be familiar with the story, the use of the story I have noticed will circle up in conversations, and I see people who will scratch their heads a moment and say, that's a Nanook moment, isn't it? And they will actually use this story that they've learned in their neighborhood guide modules and share that story among themselves. So trust has a lot to do with team being stable. The other point I think relative to team stability is empowerment. And this is a quote from one of my administrators, Lisa Welch. I'm not sure if she's in the room or not. Every problem a team solves together creates a stronger team with less turnover. I think we heard that in the Harvard Business Review a moment ago. Every problem a team solves together creates a stronger team with less turnover. So empowerment is important. How many people in this room feel like you're empowered? Yeah, empowerment it's really strong, but if we were in a group of normal nursing home folks, if you will, there would not be that many hands raised. So it's paramount to moving ourselves from institution to human habitat. Okay, now let's talk about teams working well together. The first tool that the guide modules use relative to working well together, I think, well, there's several. I guess you could argue that most of the modules do just that. But next sheet you should see in your handouts is the neighborhood team roles. And what this does is it gives everyone who's working, or most of those who are working in the neighborhood, a specific role that they have. For example, there's a neighborhood advocate for that shift that's going to make sure that everything's working well in the neighborhood. You'll see there's a communicator, like we mentioned a moment ago. That's one of those neighborhood roles. A steward who's going to make sure things look the way they should, a pantry keeper. And all these things are roles that we develop as these neighborhood self-directed work teams come together. So it's been a great tool to bring people along. And the neatest thing about the tool is that this gives a growth opportunity for those people who might not have that opportunity normally. Perhaps it's a housekeeper who is really bright, but yet because of their position, they're in a little bit of a dead-end road. So this gives them that chance to grow and to really be part of a team and to be a real leader. The next sheet is on conflict resolution. Cool, a really neat instrument for us to teach people how to solve a conflict. So often we say, well, you'll just need to go figure that out. But without the tools to solve the conflict, we really cannot expect a self-directed work team to pull that off. So conflict resolution is really important there. For example, one of the items there is listen to the issues. Well, we don't always do a good job of listening, do they? But if we all agree that this is the document that we'll use and that this is how we will go through this process, then it is something that we come back to. On the back of the sheet there, you'll see there's even fouls. These are things that we all agree we're not going to do. There's not going to be any name calling. There's not going to be any putting people down and blaming and threatening and those types of things. And you can see where in the beginning, if you start out that way, where you can say, oh, we can pull up the white flags. Hold on, we agreed early on we weren't going to do this. That's so much of what we do when we work well together as a team. We have things that we agree on up front. We have a code of ethics that we agree on, and we say this is how we will function as a team. The next item is a piece on accountability, and we talk a lot about just culture. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to talk through this real quickly. Think back on times when you have been on either side of this issue. And I'm looking at the page that says to err is human. Think back on times when you've been on either issue of an error that either you have made and how you were treated, or someone else has made an error and how that was treated. And what we try to teach in the neighborhood guide modules is there is this thing called a human error, and it's just that. When an error is made, we talk about it, we learn, we console, and we have a conversation, don't we? And then there's the step of an at-risk behavior, where somebody did something they probably shouldn't have done, but it was for what they thought was a decent reason. For example, I did a one-person transfer with someone who requires a two-person transfer because they needed to use the bathroom and everyone was busy. How many times have we heard that one? A lot. So that is an at-risk behavior that someone shouldn't do, but I don't know that they need their right arm lopped off for that. Reckless behavior, I knowingly avoided completing a treatment because it is complex and time-consuming. Well, that's a different story, isn't it? So this module helps us to categorize how we react to certain types of behavior and to realize and to acknowledge that we are in a just society and that we can learn from our mistakes. And when you make an error, let's have a conversation about that. It is not dismissing intentionally negative behavior. I don't mean to say it at all. It actually holds people at a higher standard of accountability. So great document there. Okay, then the third thing about teams, are team members passionate, committed, and will they go the extra mile? One of my favorite tools is a Triple Crown winner. Are our people competent, reliable, and do they have a great attitude? Competent has to do with knowledge, reliability has to do with they'll be there, and their attitude, well, we know that what that means. Are we hiring warm people or are we not? The idea with Triple Crown winners is real simple. If they've earned 1 crown, they probably don't need to be around there very long. If they've earned 2 crowns, can we get you to 3? And if you're 3, how can we get you to bring the 1s to 2 or the 2s to 3? It's a great great way to be able to go up to somebody and say, that was Triple Crown. Or to go up to somebody and say, I know you're Double Crown, but what can I do to help you get to Triple Crown? It's really a great tool, and I've noticed people use it kind of back and forth with one another as well once they're taught these tools. Okay, the last thing I'd like to say about being passionate, committed, and extra milers, if you will, is the idea of responsibility. And there's also the next document talks about that, and the responsibility of a team member. And it is not that idea of doing things that others won't do, but it is the idea of communicating with one another and being responsible to one another as a team. And one of the things we talk about in our team building is being good stewards of one another. And that kind of summarizes what it is to be on team, to be good stewards of one another. And are we being responsible to one another as team members? Okay, so we've addressed the issue of team, I believe, and asked some important questions. Are they stable? Do they work well together? And are they made up of passionate and committed individuals? And I think that if you hit those three things, I think you've really created that team. On the long-term success piece, I'm going to walk through this kind of quickly because I'm getting into my cohort's time frame here. There is this discussion to be had, I believe, in the relative to expense and investment. So many times we come to things like this and we spend this money, and in the institution, that's considered an expense. What is it going to cost me to do this? But I believe in the human habitat, we look at things like this conference and the other time that we spend with our educational piece, and we see it as an investment. And the neat thing to remember I don't know if there's any CPAs in the room, I know one in the back, is that the neat thing to remember about this is that in our system of where we have some type of reimbursement system, which most states have, this expense is to some extent reimbursed, right, by a Medicaid type system. So the expense does become an investment from a technical accounting standpoint, if you will. So keep that in mind as well, and kind of remind your owners and so forth about that issue. And the question of an expense versus an investment. I have up there team budgeting as well. There's a module in the guides program about the teams actually coming together and doing their budgeting. I'll give you a quick example at one of our places where the census had gone down a little bit. The team already knew they needed to come together, trim the staffing just a little bit, and before the administrator could even get to them, they had already adjusted their staffing for the level of census. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the same thing, but who better to make the decision of how we're going to adjust this staffing to meet our census than those who care for the elders. Next, how do we sustain the organization for future success? One of the greatest tools we have is teaching people how to be good coaches, how to set people up for success. The biggest compliment you can leave someone as a leader is how well your organization will run in your absence. And when we set people up for success, things run well in our absence. When we are good coaches, they run well in our absence. Team hiring and team disciplining. How many folks in the room are involved in some type of team hiring and team discipline? We're doing a little bit of that. Yeah, that's really that deep-seated team growth there. That really helps sustain the organization. Who better to select who I'm going to work side by side than the folks who are doing the work. So they're the ones that need to be making that decision, that empowered decision, and the same with the disciplining. One note on the hiring, we've also had really great luck with elders in the hiring process, and don't forget, elders who live with dementia still need to be on your hiring committee. You'll be surprised what you learn from them. And if you don't learn it directly from them, you will learn it indirectly from them by the reaction of the person whom you're interviewing with that elder. And we know that's quite important. Team disciplining, we've got one funny story after another. Doggone it, I've seen them bounce them out on their heads like, wow, I wouldn't have done that, but probably what needed to happen. And it's been just some of the greatest decisions made. Then the last thing, how do we move the organization from good to great? There are, in the module in the modules, there are also these really great growth plans for our team members that help them move from not so much of, you're doing a great job or a good job or whatever, but what does it mean to be doing that good job? And it actually, in the documents, it actually shows what it means to be doing a good job, to be doing a good job with the relationships in your team. What does that really mean? And these instruments actually take us through some of those questions. So, and the final thought I'll leave you with, and I need to leave time for the other team, coming from the great team from Pennsylvania. The biggest obstacle to being great is being good, so always challenge yourself to do more than good, because we get so complacent in being good. So look beyond being good, and when you think you're good at something, then you need to look at being great at that. So, okay, that's all I have to say.